Welcome to Banyan Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyan.com. Since 1970, Banyan Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyan.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Branches of Wisdom, the Banyan Books podcast and streaming event series. I'm your host, Ross McKeechee, and this evening's presentation is part of an annual collaboration between Banyan Books and Archaea Foundation, also known as Archaea Awareness Center. We are here in celebration of June 21st, which is the United Nations International Day of Yoga and also Canada's National Indigenous Peoples Day. Just letting everybody know that although we have people joining us from all over the world for these live streaming events, the physical location of Banyan Books and Sound is on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Most of Banyan's podcast and event series are free. We welcome your donations to keep these programs accessible for all. Just click on the PayPal link in the show description below. Also, towards the end of our conversation today, we will take questions from the live audience for our two wonderful guests, Aaju Peter and Yogacharini Maitreyi. So go ahead and type those questions into the comments field on YouTube, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. A little bit about Archaea Foundation. We're a registered not-for-profit school based out of Canada and India. And Archaea was founded by one of our guests this evening, Yogacharini Maitreyi, and it's rooted in a full-spectrum, decolonized approach to traditional yoga and tantra, as well as the allied Indian arts and sciences. We offer online programs to students worldwide and also hold in-person workshops, retreats, and corporate training. We hold a weekly online community satsang every Saturday morning, an ongoing 500-hour in-depth teacher training, and many other online courses. If you'd like to join us in a retreat led by Maitreyi, we will be at Hollyhock from June 14th to 19th on Cortez Island for Finding Fulfillment Through Tantra. Magnetize your heart's desire. And all your info can be found at our website, archaea.net. Our first guest this evening, Aaju Peter, is a renowned Greenlandic Inuit lawyer and activist based in Arctic Canada, who has spent her life fighting for Inuit rights in Canada, Greenland, and Denmark. She is a fierce defender of Indigenous rights and issues related to sustainability and resources. In 2011, she received Canada's highest honor, the Order of Canada. And since then, she has been called upon as an advisor in both the European Union and the United Nations. She is also the writer and central figure in the documentary film, Twice Colonized. In this powerful exploration of cultural trauma, director Lynn Aluna follows alongside Aaju Peter as she strives to reclaim her language and identity after a lifetime of whitewashing and forced assimilation. We're going to show a clip from that film partway through the conversation today. It's a wonderful documentary. I really recommend people find a way to see it. We'll ask Aaju in a bit how we can do that. And if you'd like to learn more about Aaju, her documentary, and how you can support her work, you can visit her website, twicecolonized.com. Our other honored guest, Yogacharini Maitreyi, was born and raised in India, where she was immersed in the yogic life for over 4 decades through her grandfather and gurus. Since 1997 in India, Maitreyi has been given formal titles like Yoga Chemal or Expert, Yoga Shiromani or Gem, and Yoga Acharini or Guide. India was colonized by the British during her grandfather's time, and for over 200 years, yoga, Ayurveda, Indian martial arts, and other arts were banned by colonial rule. Maitreyi's school, Arkaya Foundation, is dedicated to reviving the deeper dimensions of these arts and sciences, which have been watered down by mainstream appropriation. Maitreyi has been sharing the depth of yoga and tantra for over 26 years. And when she settled in Vancouver more than 6 years ago, she dedicated time to connecting with the First Nations community and elders to create more awareness about their Indigenous lifestyle, values, and healing. To learn more about Maitreyi and her work, you can visit her website, arkaya.net. Okay, lengthy introduction, but very excited to welcome Aaju Peter and Yogacharini Maitreyi. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Maitreyi, can you tell us, how you came to know about Aaju?
So I had met Aaju at the K-Docs Film Festival, and I saw her film, and it was not just the film that was inspiring, but her presence and the way she fielded so many questions and did not weaponize pain. And that's a very, very rare quality. So there was this woman, I think her ancestors were French, and she said, so do I carry the guilt of what my ancestors had done? And Aaju very graciously told her that, no, we don't have to carry down our ancestors' guilt, nor carry down the trauma. And like I said, that awareness to not transfer trauma or weaponize pain is a very rare quality. So, and her graciousness is what made me feel, okay, she is an elder that we definitely need to have on our podcast or on our webinar. So thank you, Aaju, for accepting our invitation.
Yeah, and of course, Maitreyi.
Thank you for inviting me.
There. Yeah. Sorry, Aaju, please go ahead. I just wanted to say Maitreyi came and told me about her experience meeting you and how excited she was to connect with you more.
Thank you for that. I was traveling for the past 14 months all over the place, and there were many questions where I had to be careful not to pass down the trauma, that sense of guilt that people were feeling. And life does go on, and the best solution to this is understanding, kindness, and care for each other. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Aaju. I wanted to start by asking you, I think most of the people in our audience probably will know at least a little bit about the colonization of Indigenous people on Turtle Island, but some might not know about the Danish colonization of the Inuit people in Greenland, where you come from originally. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about where you come from in Greenland and the Indigenous culture there.
I was born in 1960. If you look at Greenland, there's a big island, Disco Island, and I was born just on the mainland, close to the center of Greenland, to Greenlandic parents. But the Danes had colonized Greenland about 300 years ago, where a missionary went there and christened the Greenlanders there in 1721. To cut it short, after 300 years, almost, I was 11 when I was sent off to school in Denmark. And my father wanted me to further my education and not go back right away. So it wasn't until I was 18 that I finally moved back to Greenland. And I lost my language. I lost my connection. I just didn't know very much about Greenland or my language or my culture at that point. I was giving a talk in Denmark about 9 years ago. And this Danish filmmaker came to me and she was very curious. We talked, and that was the first time she had heard that the Danes also were colonizers. And she was so shocked that she had never been told anything about this while she was going to school. So she wanted to make a documentary about being colonized and how the Danes in 1950s had not given Greenlanders an opportunity to decide themselves whether they wanted to remain, whether they wanted to become a Danish part of the Danish colony or become independent. That's a short version.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more to it. And I just want to acknowledge that this isn't just something way back in history. As you said, you had to go off to school in Denmark, and it's something that you've lived through and continue to live the repercussions of, as do many Indigenous people. I want to circle back to that in a moment, but I just want to bring Maitreyi in here too to comment a little bit about where she's from in India and the Indigenous culture there and the history of colonization, just to make a connector here.
Mm-hmm. As many would know, we were colonized by the British for over 200 years. They came in as a trading company, and then greed always takes over. So greed took over, and they were not happy with the generosity of the land. They just wanted to rape the land, which is what happened, in short. And at least growing up, my grandfather's grouse was, oh, look at these Westerners. They banned yoga, they banned Ayurveda, they banned everything that was indigenous, and now the West is profiting off it. I mean, yoga is $1 billion industry in the West. So for him, that was his, and I grew up with him. That is my maternal grandfather, and he was a lawyer too, like Aaju, and one of the good lawyers, or heart-centered lawyers, I would say, because we have a particular, idea of what a lawyer is like, hard and, kind of cutthroat. But he was the softest person I have experienced in my life in terms of fairness and also seeing things clearly. So through him, I was exposed to a lot of the Vedic culture and what was lost. And of course, he wanted me to go and study in a traditional Gurukulam, which was also those schools, that traditional schooling system was also lost to the British schooling system. And I myself, because my parents wanted me to learn good English, I was sent to a convent. So I have both, through my grandfather, this very Eastern influence, but also through the convents, the very Western Catholic influence as well in my system. So we were always told we were less than. It was not direct, because by the time I went to school, we had independence. But yet the subliminal message or the indirect message was, our religion is better, our way of life is better, our process is better, our medicine is better, like modern medicine. So all these indigenous sciences and arts were not given as much importance. And that was the sad part of what happened in India for many, many years. And there is a revival now, but in very, very small bits. Most of the East looks up to the West, forgetting that we were one of the richest countries in all of Europe. So if you were to look at India's GDP, we were quite, a country that produced and had a lot of wealth and had a lot of spices. So it was 25 to 35% of the world's GDP, which means all of Europe put together did not produce as much as what India was producing. This was pre-British. And then once the British kind of took everything from 35, it came down to 2%. So you can imagine the reduction and how much was taken away, and in terms of the indigenous crafts and everything. But if you see the per capita income of Britain during that very same time, it went up by 300%. So each person in Britain had that much more money thanks to all the wealth they took from India. So it's interesting to see that connection and say, oh, okay, I mean, it correlates. If you're taking everything out of one country and putting it into another country, without any fairness, that's what's going to happen. And also make the people of that land feel less than and call them poor when actually they were rich. So it's a really sad story of abuse. Yeah.
There's something you say in your film Twice Colonized. I'm just paraphrasing, but there's a scene where you say that although the process was different in Denmark than it was in Canada, where you now live, in that there were no residential schools, you say that the end result is the same, to make you as Danish as possible. How is that process implemented in Greenland as opposed to how it was implemented with residential schools in Canada?
Everything was happening when we were going to school. We had to learn Danish. The first 3 years that I went to school were Greenlandic because we were in a very small community. But when we moved to a larger community when I was 8, 9, 10, everything was being done in Danish. We had to learn everything in Danish, reading about trees and pigs and apples and things that we didn't know even existed. And we were made to believe that if you did really, really well in school, then you would be sent off to Denmark for 3 months to really experience and see what you had been reading about. So we looked up to the Danes and we wanted to be as Danish as possible. And, we thought that was a great thing. That's how we were sent off 3 months at a time. My brother had been sent off for a year. In those days, it was either 3 months or a year, or some like me stayed longer. We were in different homes, and the fastest way to assimilate children is putting them in homes where they're not speaking your language, where you have to learn that culture, and it happens really fast, that process of assimilation.
One thing I'm curious about, I know in the Archaea School we talk a lot about the colonial mindset, and I'm curious to hear from both of you. How do you view, or how would you define what the colonial mindset is? This is for us an exercise, I think, in self-awareness for everyone who's listening. I don't know, maybe Maitreya, you'd like to go first, and then we can hear from Aaju.
I don't know, maybe she's the elder here. Or yeah, I can go as well. So yeah, just to start off the conversation, it is a very extractive mindset, and it's a very win-lose mindset. So more in corporate terms, when I give a lot of corporate talks, and they understand this win-win and win-lose, but they don't get the win-win-win. So usually I speak about this win-win-win mentality, which is the yogic mindset, which means that it's not just two corrupt people, profiting out of a deal, but the greater good of all is also profited. Mother Nature is also taken care of. So there is that nobility and honor which is not left behind, which is the third win. So the opposite of that, I would say, is the colonial mindset. It's on an individual level, if you look at a narcissist or a toxic person, this is the collective, kind of representation of that, the colonial mindset.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that, Aaju? How do you see the colonial mindset?
I believed in the Danish education system so much. And when I moved to the Canadian Arctic, I also believed in the Canadian white way of teaching and being. It wasn't until recently I realized how inside out every cell of me was so colonized. My way of thinking, my way of being, everything had been tainted and colonized. But it's a good lesson to learn for me, because now I can distinguish what I was learning from the Inuit communities, from my Inuit community in the Canadian Arctic, was a quite different way of being, of conducting yourself, of holding yourself. The things that we did were quite different than what, as an instance, the animal rights groups, when they went and banned, when Europe banned the import of seal and the sale of seal skins, it hit our hunters and our communities so hard, because what the Inuit hunters were doing and do still today, they go out hunting and then they share their catch. You don't do that down south, right? Because you need to be able to have an income. Your first instinct with the colonial system is to make money, take from the land and then turn it into money. You don't just take from the land and share it with your community. And then when I'm asked, so why don't you practice law? When we were taking law, we demanded to have an Inuit elder who specialized in Inuit traditional law and terminology. And those two, the Western justice system and the legal system compared to the Inuit system, are so different. The Western system is, when I had been so colonized, it was always me. The whole world revolved around me and then them. Of course, them are sitting lower and less than me. But what I learned from the Inuit community is, it's never about me, me, me. It's never about you, you, you. It's about us. We are all sitting together, same height and same level. Everything we do is all about us, not me, me, me. So there's the difference.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I think now is a good time. We have a clip to share. You referred to the seal hunt, and this clip is from your documentary Twice Colonized. So I'm just going to bring it up. It's about a 5-minute clip for everyone. It's from near the start of the film, and gives a little bit of context into Aaju's life and work a little bit, as well as a bit of an intimate portrait. So I'll just cue it up here, and then we'll enjoy. One moment.
Aaju Peter is a campaigner for the rights of her Inuit people of the Arctic. Even as the international community moves to restrict it, she was awarded the Order of Canada for her work last year.
We've been called savages, and we need to educate Europeans that Inuit have an exemption which is not working right now. We are trying to make it work.
So the question to be asked is protecting Indigenous humans as important as saving other species?
I'm not sure what you meant by the other species. Did you mean Southerners?
So in March of this year, Aaju Peter and her teenage son made the journey from Nunavut to the Netherlands so they could face hundreds of activists who were protesting against the seal hunt.
You have people who are skilled. You have jobs that can be filled. But my son, who's 17, we have the highest rates of suicide, highest unemployment, highest everything. We just top the list of everything. He doesn't have those same choices.
Hey guys, it's Darm with 24 Hours. I'm here with Karen, co-owner of Lush Cosmetics, and she's painted herself red. Karen, what's happening today?
Well, we're here to demonstrate the horrible thing that's happening on the east coast of Canada.
Canadiens assassins. Eh bien, c'est fini, ça doit cesser. C'est pour vous.
In order for our hunters to provide for our communities and for our families, we are totally dependent on our hunters catching the seal. Even though it was not aimed at our economy and our way of life, it had a devastating effect on us. What would you like us to do? Do you want us to be sustainable and traditional, or do you want us to be part of the modern economy? Guess what? It is our choice.
Boycott Canada, save the seal. Boycott Canada, save the seal. Boycott Canada, save the seal.
Hi, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, my pleasure. Welcome to the United Nations. I'm not really sure if you have been here before.
No, I have not. This is my first time.
So you live in what part of the
No, I live in Canadian.
Oh, Canadian.
Yeah. But I went to school in Denmark when I was a child
Denmark. Okay.
because I was colonized by them.
Yeah.
That's my colonizer right there.
And we're going to take the beginning of this song and do it. Easy. And then
It's so amazing to see you out there on the world stage and then seeing this very intimate scene where it seems like you're shaking it off, you're finding your joy, and you dance throughout the film. Can you tell us a bit about, is that like a regular self-care practice for you, dancing?
I love dancing. And Inuit, it's an Inuit thing. I think we laugh a lot. And even though we go through so much hardship, we know that if you cannot laugh and if you cannot dance, then life really sucks. Then you're really in trouble, right? So you have to be able to, shake it off. And it's not to diminish hardship. It's not to diminish the seriousness of things. This is our way of having been able to survive for thousands of years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are there some traditional practices that you do for healing aside from what you just described? Are there some ceremonies or ways that you connect with the land that really help you and support that?
I walk a lot, and I go fishing. I have to walk. If I don't walk, my legs start hurting from not walking. I love nature. I enjoy nature, and then my friends, the lady friends I have, the Inuit lady friends I have. You haven't laughed until you pee in your pants from laughter. It is fantastic. We do like to laugh a lot, to release, and I guess to keep growing.
Maitreyi, is there any kind of baseline practices that you recommend to people, simple things like dancing or for self-care and healing?
Yeah, when Ayu was talking about laughter, one of my main gurus, Swami Geetananda, in front of his ashram is a little board that says, "Do not enter if you cannot laugh, if you're not happy." So again, it's not like yoga is, I mean, yoga deals with depression and people are going through trauma and all of it. But the baseline that he was looking for those who wanted to train to become teachers. So the people who were coming to him were those who were training to become teachers. So the baseline he was looking for is that if you cannot transform your trauma, if you're stewing in your emotions where you can't even laugh, then you need more work outside of this ashram, then come back and become a teacher. So I can see the wisdom of all the ancient traditions who ask you to come back into this lightness. So of course, there are lots of practices in the yogic tradition, but the main practice is this deep, heart-centered connection and care to self, to others, to the community, and to the universe. So this care that is there has to be nurtured, and that blossoming is what is for me a self-care practice. How can that happen? Again, we're being aware of our lifestyle. We're seeing the foods we eat, are we eating healthy sattvic food? So on every physical, emotional, mental level, we're taking care of ourselves, others, and the community. That's in short. But of course, there's a whole elaborate system of self-care and caring not in a narcissistic way, but in a way that is inclusive of others, inclusive of life.
This film, it shows you writing the draft of your book, and under the title you write, quote unquote, "Is it possible to change the world and mend your own wounds at the same time?" What has been your experience with that? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that question at the moment?
I think it's so true. I can't just do one thing. I have to multitask. Not at the same time. I have to do one thing and then I have to go and do another thing. And I think it's the same with your own healing. If you're just trying to fight animal rights groups and all the other things and not mending yourself in the process, that would be pretty difficult. If you were just stuck and trying to mend yourself and not contribute to society or make a difference, I think those two are mutually dependent for your own healing. Not being excluding one thing and then do another. I just have to do both at the minimum. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just a reminder to our live audience that we're going to be getting to some of your questions. So go ahead, and I see that a few have already come in the comments on YouTube, but go ahead and keep putting them in and we'll get to as many of those as we can in a little bit here. So we've talked a little bit, of course, if we had more time, we could get way more in depth, but we're just kind of covering the broad bases today. We've talked a little bit about the way that colonization has happened, the impacts of it. I'm curious to know from both of you. I'll ask you first, Aaju. It's probably something that is always evolving, but I'm curious to know what you think, what the word decolonization means to you, and how we can actually try and implement that in our modern world.
Yeah, the terms are very new to us. in the Inuit language, even though they have a different word for it in Greenland. We don't even have a word for colonization. And then on top of that, we don't have a word for decolonization. It's something that we are trying to grapple with, trying to figure out what is it. But in my opinion, for myself, in my own process, when I realized that I was so colonized, I was thinking the way I was taught to be thinking, I was tasting and smelling and feeling the way I was supposed to be doing from a Western perspective, from a white person perspective. So the process of decolonization in my own head is trying to get rid of everything that has poisoned it that I don't like. What is it that I would like to see, even though I didn't grow up 100% traditionally? I absolutely didn't. But what is it that my ancestors valued? How do we treat people? How do we conduct ourselves? What is our traditional practices that were like Gabor Mate talks about it, and I already know it because that's how our elders taught us, that when you're pregnant, you shouldn't cause hardship to the mother because it's going to affect the fetus. I mean, there's so many teachings that we have traditionally that the Western society try to push away. But as our elder said, the mind is so powerful that the body is like a feather being blown in the tundra. And I was like, how can that be? I'm carrying my brain and my body is strong. How can the mind be so powerful that I'm like nothing? That itself, you could make a whole doctoral thesis on, because it's so powerful and it's so true.
Thank you. Maitre, how about you? What are your comments on what decolonization means to you?
Yeah, just taking off on what Aaju said about the mind, I remember this instance when I was at the Shivananda ashram, and that time I was quite young, like my late teens, early 20s, and I was into advertising and ad film production. So one of my gurus gave me, a book on subliminal advertising and how easy it is to manipulate and condition our minds and sell us things we don't need. So it had all this research. It was just fascinating. And then every now and then he'll be really sarcastic with me and say, oh, so this is your career choice. Is this what you want to spend all your life doing, making people buy things, that are not good for them? Do you even know what's in these products? So for me, that got thinking. Of course, even at that young age, I said, oh, I'll never do an ad for Coca-Cola, or I'll never do an ad for something which I know is blatantly not good for you. But beneath the surface, there were many products that projected themselves as good, but had all these layers of chemicals. So he kind of brought me to think about my own mind and my responsibility to manipulating other people's minds. And this was over 30 years ago. So he was quite ahead of his times. So when it comes to decolonizing, one of the main things is going back to what is valued traditionally. And as Aaju also beautifully said, just going back to our elders and saying what was valued in our culture. I know the last session, some of you must have met another elder who is Robert Yelton. So I was making a documentary about him, and there was the 100th celebration for, this was the Squamish Amalgamation Day, the 100th year celebration of the Squamish Amalgamation Day. And in that celebration, there was no VIP stand, but there was an elder stand. So if you see any big corporate event or anything that's a Western event, you'll always find a VIP stand, which means the powerful people, the people who have money, who have, kind of status in society. but the status was given to those who were older, wiser in this community. And this is the same culture in India too. It's the yogis, it's the rishis, it's the tantrics, it's the priests. By priests, I don't mean like those who just do rituals, those who are spiritual and, you know, steeped in that way of life. These are the people who are kind of given the most respect. So that, I think, is very, very important. We're losing it in a culture where, of course, everybody knows that, you know, it's becoming vapid and superficial, and whoever, you know, owns the most and possesses the most is the one who's valued the most, unfortunately. So I think going back to our old values is something really important. And unless we start seeing that value in ourselves, we're not going to see that value outside of us.
Thank you. There's kind of quite a nuanced issue that you bring up in your documentary. You're having a conversation with an old friend in Denmark, and one of the issues that you're speaking to is this idea that some people hold that Indigenous people should either stick to living only in their old traditional ways, not participating in the modern world, or they should engage with the modern industrial world in a way that is dictated by the colonial perspective. But you make the argument that you want to, and Indigenous people want to, engage in the modern world on their own terms, from their own perspectives, in their own way. I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit and comment on this issue.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that quite a bit. The importance of knowing how to survive in -60 if the world decided to cut off our electricity, our oil. For instance, we to learn our traditional practices of how our ancestors survived before we became dependent on electricity, oil, and all those modern things. If we don't, then we will disappear very soon and very fast because of our extreme climate, the winter, for instance, in the Arctic. Also, our traditional practices, we need to be bicultural. We need to maintain our traditions and learn how to take part in the modern economy. Some say that we only use a very small fraction of our brain. So it's not that the brain is going to be super full or overloaded. There's a lot more room for us to learn 2 or 4 different ways of doing things, but our own culture and the learning of the West and how the Westerners do it is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Maitreyi, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I would agree with her. For me, my biggest benefit, the fact that I'm even able to speak in English, is because I have this, you know, dance between the East and West. I was sent, thanks to the nuns, my grammar was reasonably good, you know, so I have them to thank for that. And also understanding Western religion, how they work. But of course, thankfully, I had my grandfather, so I didn't identify too much with that mindset, and I could keep my own confidence and self-respect and self-esteem. I think that is important for every child as well. It's not good to be told you're less than, and it happens, like I said, not in very obvious ways, but it can happen in subtle ways these days. You know, it's not like they're coming out, and I mean, in those days it was okay to tell somebody like you're terrible and your religion is less than. Now somebody may not be direct, but it still happens. It still happens. When I was growing up, I've still heard stories. So yeah, I think keeping that in mind is important, to see both these levels, so we don't identify with the dysfunctionality of the West, but we can extract the good or take the good. Extract, of course, not in a colonial way, but take the good and blend the best from both worlds.
We have a few questions, mostly from one person who's made quite a number of comments here, and some of them are questions. I want to. It could be a touchy subject that this person Jay Gannon is pointing to, but I think it's worth bringing up and letting the two of you address it. So Jay Gannon kind of brings up the question with that. I'm just kind of summarizing, and then I'll get to a more specific comment because they put in a number of them. This person is asking the question, okay, so that you're naming these problems, what transcends it though? Not yet articulated. Then this person says, beautiful woman, yet colonization was also evolution. Indigenous were barbaric too, to less general effect, gurus, dharma masters, bhaktis, jnanis. But you didn't transcend. You'd prefer to revert than transcend, though your trauma is valid. Love. So what do you make of these comments? I'd like to hear from both of you.
What does transcend mean?
Very good question. To go beyond
That's
is
a
typically
legitimate. I don't understand our word.
Usually it means to go beyond something.
To rise above something, to move through something.
It's not that we are trying to go backwards.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that colonization, it's not that learning Danish, English, French, Latin, and German was bad. For me, what was bad and traumatizing was that while learning 5 languages, I wasn't given a chance to learn my own language and my own culture. Somehow these languages were seen to be more important and that I should learn them. And we are not trying to go back. We can't, because we are not going to send all the white people back to Europe, are we? That ain't going to happen. We are trying to maintain what we had lost and what was put under the carpet. That was important to us, and it's still very important to have this knowledge. We are not excusing that, colonization had all these effects on us, and we learned a lot from colonization. Of course, we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater, as they say, right? So we are trying to figure out, how do we move forward without sending back the Europeans back to Europe? How do we live in a society where we can live together and respect each other's cultures and languages?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with Aaju too on that. We're not, stewing in the past. We're not saying, hey, we want vengeance. That's not the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation is awareness. And I think more people need to be aware. And it's, again, not a white versus brown versus Indigenous. Again, that's not the conversation either, because I do a lot of talks on cultural appreciation in yoga. And there I say that anybody can appropriate, irrespective of one's race or color, as the other gentleman, I forget his name, he pointed out. So it's not like there wasn't an extractive model or there wasn't injustices amongst, indigenous people, but that's, not where we're coming from. We're looking at the big picture of where one race tries to put down another. Of course, there was all of that in history in the past as well. So we're not saying that's not valid, but like I said, the awareness created is very, very important so that we see the impact of 200 plus years on a culture, on a society, and on people who are still struggling to come out of it. Again, it's Aayu's time, my grandfather's time. I was also sent to Catholic school, so my time. So, it's just creating awareness and having these conversations. I think having these conversations in a non-triggered, heart-centered way are very, very important for society. Otherwise, we go towards two extremes. We either shove things under the carpet and pretend nothing happened. And this is what happens in families with dysfunctionalities. That's why we perpetuate trauma by not talking about it, by not acknowledging it in the first place. Or we go the other extreme where we're reactive and we're fighting and you're bad, you're terrible. We don't want to go that extreme either. To find this middle path, to find this harmonious path, I think it's very important to find these ways of conversing. And that does not mean we haven't transcended it. It's a pathway to transcendence, which is very important.
Yeah, thank you both. Very illuminating. Jay Gannon did comment their definition of transcendence is evolve and be better. And of course, like you said, Maitreyi, in order to evolve and be better, we have to be aware of the issues that need to improve, the harm that has been caused, and what we're in fact transcending. We have to be fully aware of that.
Absolutely. And my guru used to call yoga conscious evolution. So in this process of conscious evolution, we have to see clearly. And that's what these sages or seers were, seers. They were not doers, but they were seers. So they saw things very clearly as it happened. And these conversations are there so we can see clearly, our history, our past, the impact, as we also have self-awareness and see clearly our own patterns, our own triggers, our own life circumstances, our own limiting circumstances, our own, positives, everything. We see everything through the lens of Karuna Sakshi Bhava or compassionate witnessing, which is very important.
So thanks, Jay Gannon, for all of those comments you put in the chat. There's another question here from Karen Brain, who says, as a non-Indigenous person, what actions, behaviors, or expressions of decolonization are most appreciated by Indigenous people? Aaju, I'll let you comment first.
It's so important that Indigenous people are not given that responsibility of teaching the colonizers, the people who have colonized, and spending all their time on trying to educate colonizers. The people who are descended from colonizers, this needs to be taught in school. All these things need to be taught at school level and university level, and people who are not in those levels have to educate themselves. You have cell phones, you have computers, you can start learning everything you need to know almost. But then if you have Indigenous friends, talk to them, sit with them, have coffee, and learn from the people that are Indigenous or who have been colonized. But we can't spoon feed you. You have to learn as much as you can. Start with yourself and start learning.
Thank you.
Any comments, Maitreyi?
Yeah, for me, I would say the willingness to listen is the first step, because I think it triggers guilt or pain or some emotion in the person. Maybe their capacity to listen is diminished. So I think self-work or self-awareness work or self-healing work for every individual. I'm not talking about Indigenous people or a white person. I'm not talking about that. Even a person who wants to have a conversation, I think if they've done enough self-work, then they've developed the capacity to listen without projecting their preconceived notions of how things should be, or how they want to be placated in the conversation. So instead of that, just being present is a big skill. And I've seen that very rarely people have that skill set. They just can be present and say, okay, I'm here to receive and listen to what this person has to share about their life. It's their lived experience. And I've heard this from many, many Indigenous people. I'm involved with a lot of communities here. So just to be, and I've listened to stories and stories and stories. And I think that is because of my yogic training, where I was able to just sit and listen. It's their lived experience. So to have that capacity is, I would say, the first, or to cultivate that capacity in oneself, I think is the first step.
Thank you both. And thanks, Karen, for that great question. There's another one here from Michelle, who says, thank you, Aaju, Maitreyi, and Ross. Wonderful discussion. Many colonized peoples have lost connection to the old ways or familial elders. Is there a way to find a sustained connection without these?
I'll let Aaju answer first.
Can you paraphrase the question?
Yeah, so she's saying many colonized peoples have lost connection to the old ways or their familial elders. Is there a way to find a sustained connection going forward without the connection to the old ways or the familial elders?
I think what Mate was saying is the starting point. You have to do the work yourself and be self-aware. And it depends what culture you're coming from, what language you want to learn. I lost my language. I couldn't speak my language, but my desire to learn propelled me so fast that now I teach adult Inuit their own language, who all lost their language, who want to learn more. So there's so many people that people can go to for support if they want to relearn something, or if they have lost something they want to learn. There's always room for us every day to improve ourselves. Even as old people as I am, I find it very hard to change practices that are not good for me, but we should always strive to learn and want to learn, and start with ourselves and then go and learn whatever the person wants to learn.
Your sound got a little bit garbled there for a minute, Aiju, but we got most of what you said, though. We got the essence of what you were saying about, it's about doing the work yourself, having that self-awareness and starting from that place, right?
Yeah.
Maitreyi, any comments on that question?
Yeah, I would say that for me, of course, I had the good fortune of having my grandfather as my first guru and elder. And then I studied at the Shivananda ashram, but it was still very male teachers. I mean, not that, you know, I was discriminating gender-wise, but I wanted to see a woman in that position as a guru and spend more intimate time. And I think when the heart desires something in a pure way, this was 30 years ago. I said, I want to study with a woman guru, a female teacher. And just 3 hours from where I lived by road, I met Amma Meenakshi Devi. She doesn't teach anymore, but at that time she was teaching, and I was one of 4 students. So I had the good fortune of finding her. She doesn't advertise. She was, at that point, there was no, big website or that or nothing. Somebody said, oh, you just go here and you ask for her. And I was just asking around, and I found her, and she spoke to me for like 1 hour. I couldn't even open my mouth. She just, was just sharing about everything. She said, oh, that's wonderful. Like, you really want to go deep, and, just pack your bags and come. The minimum commitment is 6 months. You'll have to live with me. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I went, told my mother, and I left. So the point I'm trying to make is, when you're really want to connect with an elder, seek them out through your intentionality, through your prayers, and new elders will come into your life. They need not necessarily be biologically connected to you, is the point I'm trying to make. I've had many elders who are not biologically connected to me. I know a lot of First Nations elders now who I've learned a lot from. and, some of them in their 80s. And, we're just laughing because they all have this sense of humor. They've moved through that pain. They've transcended that pain. It's not that they're stewing with it. But these stories are important to share. And like I said, my heart sought them out, and my heart's desire manifested by me actually meeting them in person, immaterially. So I'm sure for you too, that will happen. If you resonate with somebody, go have a conversation with them, connect with them, and, meet them and do the practices, whatever practices they're telling you, whichever culture they're from, and apprentice. So this aspect of apprenticeship is very, very important in the yogic tradition, and I think also in the indigenous cultures. So, and having that humility to go and apprentice with them. So I would say I'm sure you'll find, somebody that matches your desire.
Thank you. And we actually, Aaju dropped off. Her connection isn't great. She texted me, and we're just at our finishing mark anyway. So I'm sorry that she's not here with us for our closing. But a big thank you to Aaju Peter for taking the time to speak with us today, and of course to you, Maitreyi, and to the Banyan community, as always, for your support and all of the wonderful questions. If you want to learn more about Aaju Peter and her work, and if you want to stay up to date on the documentary and different ways to view it, you can go to their website, which is twicecolonized.com. And you'll see that there's a tab at the top there that says Take Action. And there's a couple of different ways that you can donate either to Aaju's work or to the women's shelter in Iqaluit. I don't know how to say the name, the Inuit word, but there's a women's shelter, the Kimavik Women's Shelter, that you can donate to. So go to twicecolonized.com and you can click on the Take Action tab. And of course, Maitreyi's school, Arkaya Foundation, you can find at arkaya.net. We do all kinds of online programs. There's a retreat coming up at Hollyhock, June 14th to 19th. So you can go to arkaya.net, look at the events tab, or look at the programs tab, and you can see all the different offerings, including the Saturday morning satsang that happens weekly. Wishing everybody a wonderful evening, Maitreyi. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I was just looking at the chat to the side. Maybe you can copy and paste it, and next Thursday when I can address that, the following Thursday when we have our conversation.
Sure, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yes, next Thursday. My apologies. Yeah, next Thursday we'll be having the follow-up, the secondary conversation in this series, where Maitreyi will be speaking with me on reclaiming Tantra, decolonizing yoga and spiritual practices. So looking forward to that. That's next Thursday, the 23rd, also at 7 p.m. Pacific, and you can find that on the Banyan upcoming events page. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyan Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele. The show is edited by Abdo Habani. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyan Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyan.com.